All right, this is an email I got, and I think this person is confirming a previous story I did. It's a UFO story that I did it happened in Oklahoma. I don't remember the story, and I don't remember what video it was, but I'm going to read this account. It's a woman. She doesn't want me to use her name, but let's find out what she says, because I haven't read this. I'm reading it cold. She says, the account you read of the UFO account in Oklahoma from Rusty is 100% true. Now, if you guys remember what video that was, maybe you can drop a link in the comments. If you put any kind of link in a comment, it gets kicked over for me to review. But I look at those all the time, and I delete the ones that are terrible, the ones that are in review, and I approve the ones that just kind of get kicked over there by accident. But if this is a link to that video, I'll approve it and let it go in the comment section. So let's go on with her story. I was a police officer at the time. I'd rather not say what department. That night I was on duty, but I was planning on using a few hours of comp time. As I was headed in, a traffic officer called the police department advising that it appeared that a jet was in trouble and to please contact the base. We had previously served as support after one of the training jets had crashed, so this was not an unusual request. Everyone was immediately on full alert, waiting for confirmation, and a few minutes passed and I headed toward another area for better observation. And meanwhile, the public had lit up the phone lines to report the light that they were seeing. We watched this ball of light as it descended diagonally toward our city, and suddenly it appeared to stop in mid-fall. Dispatched advised East Side officers to go to a different radio channel for further instructions. After switching to a different channel, we were advised to stand by, and we watched the light stop and remain stationary before dispatch ordered me to the station to help with the phone traffic. A few minutes later, when I arrived at the police station, I was informed by my sergeant that we were on a full alert from the base, and a minute later, the infamous red telephone rang. Now, this phone had never rung before. Everyone always said that it was a hotline to Washington, D.C., and that night we found out that that was true. My sergeant had a deer in the headlights look on his face as he stared at that phone. The other sergeant answered it and immediately jumped out of his chair and stood at attention. I know that's weird and it's almost comical, but after several yes sirs, he hung up and looked at us and he said, "It's him." He said that until we know the situation, the base is in charge. He also said that we were not to speak about this incident. It was then that the base contacted the police station advising us that they had fully armed jets in the air, and we were advised that they were in pursuit of this object. And for the next hour, that craft was between Kansas City and Houston airspace, and it was going back and forth. No aircraft on Earth could have covered the distance between Kansas City and Houston in 6 minutes flat. It was like a game or something. It would stop until the jets got close, and then it would take off again. Radar documented every bit of this. The lights of the jets looked like ping pong balls compared to the beach ball-sized light of this object. After the incident was called, everyone was told to stand down. The military and some oddball suits showed up for debriefing. Well, I played it off as if I didn't see anything. Being a female back then was reason enough for the suits to ignore me. I was told later that the military instructions were, don't acknowledge anything and keep it out of the press. From what I saw, it appeared that over half of that craft was in shadow. I honestly couldn't begin to estimate the size. The last time I saw it, it went straight up and it disappeared in the blink of an eye. Whatever it wasn't from our world. Okay, I love these stories, And I wish I had noticed this email. I bet she sent it pretty quick after I did the video. But I'm telling you, and I want to share the video with you, but I do so many of these that I just can't remember. And it would take hours to find it. Because it could be in a video where Bigfoot is the main topic of the video, and I drop this UFO story in the middle of it. It would just take forever. But this is confirmation on a sighting another writer saw. This person was in law enforcement. She was there to witness all the communication between the Army base, apparently Washington, D.C., when her sergeant said, "It's him." Who does that mean? Was that the president? I don't know. I don't know who "it's him" means, but they were given strict orders to not talk about it. And I don't know. Maybe I hope her writing this email to me doesn't get her in trouble, but she sent it, so I'm going to share it with you. Anyway, I love these flying objects, this UFO stuff. It is so interesting to me. Honestly, it's a lot more interesting to me than the Bigfoot stuff, because it's spectacular. Plus, there are so many more authentic videos and film and testimonies about these flying objects. And it's becoming more and more and more common, and more government agencies who probably at one time would keep this stuff quashed, or whistleblowers are coming out, pilots are coming out saying, we don't know what this stuff is. It's real interesting stuff. And I always say I'm going to dig deeper, and I never do. Every time I read one of these stories, I'm thinking, man, I want to know more about this. So maybe I'll find time to do that. But this was a wonderful story, and thank you to the writer for sending it. I'm sorry I didn't get it up almost immediately after the other video, because I'm sure that's when this came in. Okay, thank you. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let's go to another one. This writer doesn't give his name, but he writes a really good story, and he claims this is true. My grandfather had a hunting camp in Texas that he sometimes took me and my cousin to. I don't want to say the exact location, but it's near a particular ranch that was famous for being won in a game of poker. Our property was positioned so we could turn off the main road and go straight through the gate at the front, and then down a dirt road to the camp. It was nothing more than a portable trailer that slept 5 people comfortably, and another trailer that was used for storage. The whole place was surrounded by barbed wire. I wasn't too familiar with the layout of the property, but I could follow the fence lines. One morning of the last day we planned to hunt, at 5 a.m., we were leaving to go to our deer stands. It was cold and dark, and my grandfather and my cousin had already left. My four-wheeler was so cold that it wouldn't start no matter how many times I tried, and after 5 minutes I decided it was best to start walking. This was a situation I was afraid of out here. There was no telling what kind of animals were around. Across the road was a canyon famous for mountain lion sightings, but I didn't have any choice. It was walk or miss the last day of deer hunting. So I grabbed my backpack, my .308, my thermos of coffee, and I headed off to find the fence line. I had a headlamp that I was using to light my path as I followed the barbed wire fence, and on the ride over, I had heard my grandfather talking to his neighbor on the phone about a cow that had disappeared from the herd a couple of days before. He said it couldn't have wandered off, but there was no trace of it anywhere. I was walking down the fence line when I saw something that made me stop and take a harder look. 50 feet on the other side of the fence were the remains of a fully grown cow. It looked like something had been eating on it for a while. There was a little meat on the rib cage that looked like a pack of coyotes had come up and fed on, but that wasn't what got my attention. The cow's head was separated from its body. It was lying 5 or 6 feet from the cow as if something had ripped it off. I stood there and looked at it for no more than 15 seconds when something else off in the distance caught my eye. All the way down the fence line, it comes to a corner. And at that point, there are 2 red lights flickering on and off. Well, I thought it may have been some kind of machinery at first, but the longer I looked at it, the more I began to realize that it was a pair of red eyes. Nothing I know of has red eyes like that out here. I chambered a bullet in my rifle, had the stock resting on my shoulder just in case. Those eyes were blinking, and they were looking right at me. I stood there looking back at it until they went out like a candle. I hesitated to approach the spot, but I had no choice if I wanted to get to my deer stand. And when I got there, I realized how tall that thing must have been. I had seen the glint of the barbed wire from where I was standing, and now that I was close up, I could see that the fence was 4 feet tall. The eyes had been 2 or 3 feet above that, so whatever those eyes belonged to had to be between 6 and 7 feet tall. I was never one to believe in Bigfoot, but those measurements had me questioning my belief. I had to tell my grandfather about the cow, but I didn't mention the eyes to him. Later that day, we went over to investigate the cow, and to our surprise, it was gone. The head was gone, the ribs were gone, the legs, and everything. It was as if something had picked it up and hauled it off. And for a minute, they thought I might have been telling tales or had a location wrong. But could a cow that weighed over 500 pounds have just disappeared? That night was quiet. It was unusually quiet, and I couldn't stop thinking about those red eyes, so I laid there and I watched the clock. At 1:30, I was still awake. Every time I closed my eyes, all I saw were those red eyes. And then I heard something outside the trailer. The trailer had a porch on it, so I could hear footsteps coming up the stairs. The wood creaked loudly with every step as it made its way to the porch and approached the door. Now, my bed was a roll-out couch positioned right in front of that door, and the green light of the alarm clock lit up the room well enough that I could see the door lying on my back. I watched in terror as the door handle jostled back and forth just a little. My grandfather and my cousin were sleeping next to me in the bunk beds, but I was wide awake, and the handle went from side to side as I watched it, barely able to breathe. At any moment, I expected the door to open and I would be face to face with a monster that was 5 feet away from me. I was already sitting up to grab my rifle that was beside my bed when the thing outside walked back down the steps and off the porch. I got up and went over to make sure the door was really locked, and to my horror, it wasn't. I quickly and quietly locked it, and I went back to my bed, and I had barely had time to lie down when I heard the thing come back up the stairs and cross the porch again. This time it jiggled the door a little more forcefully. I figured it must have heard me lock it, and that's why it came back. And then I heard whatever this was walk toward the window near the clock. That was the most terrifying moment of all. I saw a dark shadow peering in the window, and in the upper part of the window, I saw those same 2 red eyes that I had seen by the fence earlier. This thing had tracked me all the way back to camp, and it was looking at me through the window. What's more, this thing really was massive. I pulled the blanket up until it was under my eyes, and I watched in horrified disbelief. I was actually afraid to move. I was afraid to wake up my grandfather. I was afraid not to. All I could do was stare back at the red eyes that were staring at me. And after a few minutes, just like they had done on the fence line, the eyes went out like a candle, and I never saw them again. 5 minutes of pure terror later, I heard a loud vocalization a half mile off in the distance. It was like a loud whistle or a siren, but it was coming from the direction of the woods where the dead cow had been. The next day, we packed up and left. That had always been our plan, and I never told my grandfather or my cousin about what happened that night. I didn't want them to think that I was crazy. But one question has bothered me more than anything. What would it have done to me if it had gotten in? Oh, that's exactly the question I'd be asking. What if that thing didn't... You said the door was unlocked when it was jiggling it before. Maybe it didn't quite know how to turn the doorknob to open a door. I don't know. How would it even know to reach for a door handle? These stories just generate so many questions in my head. That's right. I would think if it had gotten in, what would I have been dealing with then? Man, I don't, I don't even know what to say about this story. There's just so many things running through my mind that I might have to think about this. And by the time I get it sorted out in my head, I'll already have this podcast up. But anyway, this was a great story. I loved it. The man claims it's true. The red-eyed monster that stalked him from a cow carcass all the way back to his cabin and tried to get in the cabin. That's crazy. That's just crazy scary. But thank you to the writer for sending it. It was a great story. Appreciate you. All right, this writer has a YouTube channel called Trailhead Adventures, and they related this story on their channel just in their own words, but she's written me the story to share on my channel. I'll put the link for Trailhead Adventures in the description. She says, I'm not sure if this is a Bigfoot experience, but something was happening. I have a YouTube channel that this experience is on, but my channel is all about camping and hiking with my family. It's good, wholesome activities for the family, and I hope you guys would enjoy it with your kids. Anyway, she says, here's what happened to us. My dad and I enjoy hiking anywhere there is or isn't a trail. So we decided to let Nana watch my boys, and him and I go up to the mountain. I had scouted this trail beforehand, so we knew the trail and how far it took to the peak. On this particular day, it started like any other, warm and the sun beaming on our heads, and there was a gentle breeze smacking our back and dry dirt under our boots, and we were ready for the trail. As always, we always said a prayer before heading out, making sure all was well, and we had plenty of snacks and a flashlight and a rope. And my dad's, he's an over-preparer sometimes, and we had plenty of liquids. We started the trail excited to escape the many pressures of life and chores, and we had a wonderful couple of miles. And as we reached halfway, the clouds were coming in heavy, and it looked like it might rain. And rain it did. In fact, it poured. Not only that, since we were halfway to the top, the clouds just opened, and then it really poured. It was like standing under a waterfall with lightning and thunder all around. We were in a bad spot. There was no shelter or trees or anything to hide under, so we did the best we could. There were plenty of shrubs that we had to lay low and shelter in place by, and we put our coats over the tops of our heads. And this downpour lasted 15 or 20 minutes. We just had to sit there and wait. When it was finally done, we stood up because the wind was still pretty strong, pushing us here and there. The clouds still hung around, but the rain had moved on over the canyons and into the town below. We were finally able to reach the peak, which really wasn't that large, just a cute little hilltop with nothing on it. So we climbed around, taking the videos and pictures for whatever reason, and we got turned around. That has never happened to us before. We were at the peak, walking back down the trail, and had a blank moment, and my dad looked at me and I looked at him, and we were both at a loss for words. He then proceeded to walk back to the peak and make a slight right turn, saying that we missed the trail on the opposite side. The trail was supposed to make a loop around the peak and then back down the opposite side. When we made that slight right turn, the path ahead turned into a small thicket on both sides. The thicket was dark and dreadful looking. Maybe the rains and dark clouds gave it that creepy look, but I took one look into that place and my happy feeling was gone, and all the spidey senses were on high alert. I told him, nope, we're not going in there. For whatever reason, it was not happening. We then collected our thoughts and made a left turn off the nose of the hill, and we walked downward, crunching our kneecaps as we went. After 20 minutes, we finally made it back to the trail where we had to hunker down from the storm, and somehow we had turned around from the loop and made it back to the front of the peak, not to the back. We both looked at each other again, confused as to what had just happened. My dad told me to look down at my feet, and there in the mud was a $5 bill, and in the bush next to me was a red bandana. We were the only ones on that trail that we knew of. I don't know what the deal was, but I was done. We didn't pick up the $5 or even touch the bandana. We just continued on the trail and headed back towards the car. I would have picked up the $5 bill. I don't know why that popped out of my mouth, but I would have picked up that $5 bill. I would have left the bandana, but I'm not walking by a $5 bill. Now you can offer it to you can give it to somebody on down the trail, but pick that money up. Anyway, the wind was still strong, as if pushing us further and further away from the peak. And after about an hour, we had finally made it back to the car. And it was a good thing too, because the rain was starting to kick up again. To this day, we have no clue how we had lost the trail and why that creepy feeling set over us. But I'm grateful to listen to my feelings, and I had my dad there with me. I don't think I want to find out what could have happened if we had chosen the wrong path. And then she writes, I'm sorry if this is not what you expected, but it wasn't for me either. I think she's saying this wasn't like a really crazy Bigfoot story, but a lot of people have experiences they claim with Bigfoot where they get confused, they have time loss, all kind of things happen because they claim these creatures are around. I don't know how that happens. I don't have any idea. I've never had any kind of experience like that, so it's hard to relate. But I can relate to the fact that people do get turned around, and people, they'll even walk up a mountain, and they think they're walking down, but they think they're walking up. I don't know. The 411, is that right? Is that what it is? The 411, 1144, David Pilates, whatever those stories are called. I think that happens to people with those stories. They get turned around and they just start walking, and I don't know, they wind up on a highway somewhere, in another state. Weird things happen out in the woods. Who can explain it? This was very interesting. Go check out her channel, Trailhead Adventures. It is in the description. There's a link in the description. Now, in my last video, there were some girls here in Mississippi where I live who have a channel. I did a little 15-second blurb of them. I said I would put their link in the description, but I couldn't find their channel anywhere. Thankfully, about 4 hours into the video, I was watching the comments and someone had found it and put the link in the comments. So I grabbed that link, edited the description. It was there. I don't think I'm going to have any trouble with Trailhead Adventures, but I'm going to look. So anyway, if it's not there, it's just because I couldn't find it. Maybe someone else can find it and let me know what it is. But take a look at the description and go over there and say hi to Trailhead Adventures. Okay, man, I can ramble on. Let's go to something else. This is a story that's a little bit different. It's not like a person is describing their encounter, but just listen to the story and tell me if you don't think this is very intriguing. The writer says, "Hi Cameron, I have debated relaying this to you and just decided that I should just go ahead and share it. I swear it's the truth, and frankly, I'm surprised at the results. For over 30 years, I taught adult education classes to corporations who needed employees to learn software, programming, etc. Each seminar would last for a day or two usually and consisted of maybe 12 students per class, so you got to know the students very well. We would do 2 breaks and a lunch daily, but sometimes people were tired and just needed a mental break as they were becoming overwhelmed with the information. I would call these mental breaks. I would ask crazy questions just to see what people would say. Who has met someone famous? Who has vacationed in Europe? Who's been hit from behind in a car? Who's gone to a Rolling Stones concert? So one day I just threw this one out. Who has seen a ghost? Well, I expected no one to fess up to that, as coworkers might think that they were crazy or something. Instead, about 1/2 of this particular class told their ghost stories, and I was shocked. The ones who had not seen ghosts knew people who claimed to have seen one or more. Anyway, I became curious, and I started asking the ghost questions in about every classroom. I would warn them that I had some fun questions during the day, and a few weird questions as well. They were more than willing to share their experiences, and I would guess that all of my students, and we were talking thousands of students, about 1/3 had had experiences with ghosts. Later I started throwing in who has seen a Bigfoot? And at that question, I would get laughs. But I did end up with 4 students who swore they had crossed paths with a Bigfoot. And then I found out that our office manager had come face to face with one in Idaho when she was 12 years old. She was out at night running around the weekend getaway cabin with her siblings, and they came face to face. She said that this thing smelled awful. It was a reddish-brown color and was a he, and that he was just as shocked to see them as they were to see him. They ran, and the creature ran beside them with the trees and limbs as a divider between them. And the next day they went back with their parents and found thick branches broken on the side the Bigfoot was running on. For my students, the Bigfoot sightings were always in the woods, and even though these people said they were scared to death, no harm came to any of them. The creatures would just walk away and disappear. Then he goes on to write, yes, you can use this story if you wish on your podcast. Personally, I have not seen a Bigfoot, and I may have seen a ghost once, but it was a quick flash in the corner of my eye. Again, all of the above is the absolute truth, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I love your podcast. I never thought I would relate any of this, but now I feel like it's the right thing to do. Best regards, and he signs the email. That's interesting. People, that's why I do this channel. I mean, it wasn't the plan to begin with. I just wanted to do something on YouTube, and, you know, I wasn't good. I'm never good at putting the camera on myself. I thought, I love these stories. My grandkids love these stories, and so I just thought I'd give it a whirl. And come to find out, people all over the world have, I mean, just regular people, you know, just average people like me. They just have strange experiences, and they have really no one to tell them to. I mean, they can tell them to their friends, they can tell them to their brothers and family members, whatever, and they usually get laughed at. But it really is amazing how many people have these weird stories, and this is just a good place to share them with you. And we just stay in our lane. We just tell weird stories, and these are real, actual stories that people send to me, and we do edit a few just to make them more legible, because some people aren't great writers, and that's fine. I read this word for word. It needed no editing. This man can obviously put sentences together and thoughts onto paper, so it made perfect sense. Anyway, I thought this was intriguing because it kind of clicks with my channel, because I'm looking in my inbox and I've got over 1,800 emails in my inbox that I haven't even opened yet. And I get to 2 or 3, maybe 4 in every podcast. And I'm going to do my best to get to every single email. If you've sent a story and I just can't make heads or tails of it, sometimes I delete those. Believe me, some of them are really, they're just illegible. I can't understand what's going on at all. And some of them, if they're not that bad, I edit them. Neoma edits them. Trust me, if I read them just like people send them, about 20% of them, you would have no clue what's going on in these stories. So I try to make them enjoyable and readable. I don't know. I guess I'm saying this for the newer people. That's what this channel's all about. We just are over here in our little corner having fun, telling these cool stories for your entertainment. We're not here to help people. We're not here to get people therapy. If you've had trauma with some kind of weird experience with a Bigfoot or a ghost or a UFO, you don't need to rely on a YouTube creator for your therapy. You need to go see a therapist. That is not what we do. We just share these stories for your entertainment. If it helps the person get it off their chest, that is a great little bit of icing on the cake. But I've never claimed to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to give anybody any kind of false hope that I can help them in any way, emotionally or mentally, with some bad experiences you've had. If you don't want to send your story because of what I just said, don't do that. Just don't send it. For me, this is all fun. For some people who send these stories in, I know it's quite, for some people it's therapeutic. For most people, it's a lot of fun to rewrite these and send them in and listen to them read back, knowing that, maybe 10 or 15,000 people heard their story. You can write in anonymously. Nobody has to know your name or where you're from or anything like that. I haven't talked about this in a while. This letter kind of, got me thinking a little bit about exactly why I do this and what I do here, so that there's just a ton of new people following along. And I just thought I'd let you know, this channel's just for fun. It's for entertainment. So enjoy it. And I guess that's all I wanted to say. Just rambling on, as usual. All right, that's going to be the last story in this podcast. I really appreciate you guys clicking on this video or clicking on the podcast in whatever podcast app you're using, because I'm so thankful for the people who listen and enjoy this, especially the people who leave great comments. And even, there's only about 10% of people, probably less, who actually make comments in the comment section. So thanks to all the people who never comment. You're so appreciated. If there was a way that I could make you feel that, I would, but you're just going to have to listen to my voice and know that I'm truly, truly thankful for the people who listen and keep this storytelling experience in the spirit that it is intended, and that is for fun. It's just for fun. So thanks again. I hope to see you guys on the next podcast. There'll be one up pretty soon. I appreciate you, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.